Okay, so question number 2 is, what is your experience with people telling you you're not autistic when you've discovered that about yourself? So, I actually, I'm not on TikTok, and for whatever reason, I feel like this is probably a bigger issue on TikTok where you say some part, like, you might say, I'm autistic, and then people will be like, no, you're not. People in my day-to-day life, there have definitely been some people that are like, ooh, like, make sure you actually know what you're talking about. But no one has ever been like freaking nasty about it, which, yay, gratitude. But also, like, I mean, this person was talking about people pleasing too, which let me just read that again. I don't know if I already forgot if I said that in this video already. But they said, I'm like you, a people pleaser, and so people's opinions sometimes matter too much, and I find it really discouraging. So, I mean, I feel like I could actually make so many videos about people pleasing because I I've been in therapy like in and out since high school. But the therapist I have now is the first time that I've really like confronted my people pleasing head on, and I feel like I've just learned so much in such like a relatively short amount of time about like addressing people pleasing and where it comes from and understanding when it shows up. So I think the people pleasing is like a whole other beast to tackle. And there's a lot of layers to it, like everything, which I feel like I always say. But I think a big part with, I guess, both these pieces, both the people pleasing and then people say, no, you're not when you say you're something. I do always try to, this is actually something I'm working on, which is kind of a people pleasing thing where I give a billion disclaimers before I say something. So when it comes to autism, I'll be like, oh, I know a lot of people are self-diagnosing and like you got to be careful with it, but like trust me guys, like I've done research, like I know. But it's like at the end of the day, me identifying as autistic isn't really causing harm. I feel like not in the way I'm doing it. Like I'm trying to think of instances where it would be causing harm, because I do know there can be dangers with self-diagnosing and like normalizing it, but I feel like what a lot of people who are self-diagnosing with autism are doing is, first of all, understanding like the circumstances of what does an official diagnosis even require. So an official diagnosis, first of all, is like not accessible to a lot of people because how much it costs. If you're someone that was born with a vagina, it can be even more challenging to get diagnoses. For me, getting my ADHD diagnosis was just a year ago. I was undiagnosed for most of my life. No one even suggested it to me till a few years ago that I could have ADHD. So I thought I was just flopping at life every day, right? And I think autism definitely falls under that same category of might be more challenging to identify in someone who looks like me. Um, and yeah, on top of that, having an official diagnosis there's still like a lot of really ableist laws. The one that comes to my mind is, I think it's in New Zealand, there's immigration laws where you can't move there if you've been officially diagnosed with autism. So like really ridiculous and horrible stuff like that, where it's like there are certain really unfortunate consequences you have to face when getting an official diagnosis. I haven't done a ton of research on like the New Zealand laws. I know it's not just New Zealand, it's other countries. Honestly, because like I'm not really focused on like leaving or like moving to those places right now, but still something to keep in mind where it's like there are laws that will impact you if you're officially diagnosed with certain things that are categorized as disabilities, right? Which is messed up and unfair, but it's also like the reality of the world that we're living in right now. And so yeah, not having an official diagnosis, there's multiple reasons why someone cannot have that or not even want that. But that brings us to self-diagnosing yourself. I think it's just really important to understand why you're doing it. Which maybe seems, I don't know, maybe that doesn't seem like a really big deal, but I think when you're someone who's neurodivergent and you've grown up your whole life feeling like you don't fit in, it can feel really enlightening. It can feel just really good to be like, oh, there's an explanation for it. And for me, that felt super, super important because my whole life I was like, how come I struggle so much with things that other people seem to just be able to do? Like, I when I was younger, I'd be on Google looking up how to socialize because I couldn't understand it. And at this time, like, there wasn't a lot of information on the internet. I watched like all the YouTube videos I possibly could watch, and they didn't really help. And um, I just felt really, really lonely, and like there was just something wrong with me. And autism was never like a possibility for me because of the way autism was represented, and how like it wasn't really conceptualized as a spectrum, or at least not in a very well-known way at the time. So for me, as someone who, I don't know, like people thought I was weird for sure, but like not in a way where they're like, oh, that person's definitely autistic. Like it was more like they're just weird. So like for me, I didn't have the understanding that my brain, and like I said, I wasn't diagnosed with ADHD, so I didn't have this understanding that my brain truly just operates differently. And it caused a lot of shame. I mean, elementary school, middle school, high school is wait, why am I blanking? Is it 18 years? No, it's not. Um it's a large chunk of your life though. And I think, oh, it's wow, 13 years. Why was that so challenging for me? I am like in the United States, so that's probably different for other countries, but like 13 years of your life, like looking back, I'm like, wow, it doesn't seem like that much time the older you get, but when you're that age, it feels like forever. It feels like an eternity. I think there's also something about like how time feels like it moves slower when you're younger. I don't know if that's been proven, but I definitely feel like that was my experience. So it felt like forever, like where I was in this stage of not, of just feeling like something was wrong with me. So yeah, when one of my friends suggested that I could have autism, I was like, there's no way. And then I took the Radzar test and I didn't really know how to take it. So my first score was like, oh, you might. And I was like, yeah, but like, okay, but probably not. And then I retook it with my friend and they were explaining the questions to me. And then I got a score that was really damning, where I was like, oh, okay, so this is a thing. And it was really emotional. It was a lot for me. And I think race also like factored into it because like this is why representation is like really important. Even though looking back, I'm like, I knew autistic people that were Asian, but I was like, it felt like I couldn't be because I was Asian. I was like, autistic Asian people, like, for whatever reason, it just felt like I wasn't allowed to be that because I only, like, mostly it was like just white autistic people that I grew up around. And it like blew my mind. It felt like there was this part of myself that I had just been like hidden in plain sight my whole life, and I was finally like seeing it, and it was just so much. I know I'm kind of really going in the deep end here, but here's the thing though, as much as the label has helped me, even if someone wants to argue that technically I can't be autistic, I'm at a place where it's like, okay, but my brain operates differently. I had all these difficulties with socializing growing up. So even if someone wants to gatekeep that term and says I can't use it, for me at this point, it feels like I'm like, how do I explain this well? It allowed me to reach a point of compassion that I could have reached without like calling myself autistic or identifying with that term, where I could have just been at a point where it's like, I do operate differently, my brain works a little differently, and that's okay. But for me, that label or that self-diagnosis felt really important for me to get to that point, to have compassion with myself. But now I'm kind of like going back where it's not that I'm against the term, like I honestly really do resonate with it. But for me, it's like, I understand myself, I understand what I've been through. People cannot tell me that I didn't go through the things I went through that like made me reach the conclusion that I'm autistic. So like all the things that allowed me to feel comfortable actually taking on that label, like all those things still happen no matter what, no matter if it was linked to autism or if it was linked to something else. It's like I still have those experiences, and I think when you're a people pleaser, you have to really be secure in what you've been through. You have to have confidence in what you've been through to a point where people can't. People throw around the word gaslight a lot, and I use it very intentionally, but like in this instance, it applies. You need to reach a point where people can't gaslight you about things, where you understand your history, you understand your experiences, you know they happen for certain, and people can't tell you that they didn't happen. So that's how I deal with people like maybe being like, oh, I don't know if you have that, because it's like, I know what I went through, and for people to tell me I didn't go through that. I actually was writing about this for like an astrology article in my Substack, which maybe doesn't seem related at all, but I'm working on it. I'll talk about it later maybe. Yeah, like when you know something for certain, people can't convince you of that otherwise. The example I used in my article and the example I'm going to use now, my hair is brown. If someone comes up to me and tries being like, you're blonde, like, if I'm at a place where I, like, for whatever reason am doubting that I'm actually, like, someone with brown hair, I might entertain that. I might be like, oh, like, oh, maybe I don't have brown hair. But for me, it's like, I know for certainty without a doubt that I have brown hair. So if someone were to come up to me and tell me that I didn't, I'd be like, you're wrong. So to bring this to the autism stuff, like if someone were to come up to me and be like, you didn't have these experiences, I would be like, yeah, I did. And if they try to be like, no, but like it's not because of this, it's because of like I think for me it's not only understanding these experiences, but like why you had them, which kind of, there are some things that can't be explained right, but for me, the conclusion I received through processing my early childhood experiences, or I guess just my life experiences in general, is that I operate differently. I'm neurodivergent, my brain's different, and for someone to come up to me and try to be like, no, it's not, and try to use a different explanation of like, oh, you're just not trying hard enough, like, which is something that I would kind of tell myself growing up, or I'd get some feedback like that, but for me, if someone were to come in and validate me, to me, it would feel like they were implying like, oh, you just didn't try hard enough to like socialize or whatever. But I've reached a point where I'm secure knowing that like that was not the case. My brain truly operates differently. So, and this applies to like people pleasing in general. Oh my God, I feel like I should just make another video about people pleasing. Okay, let me try to make this concise and then maybe like elaborate on it in a later video. But people pleasing occurs when, due to certain experiences you had, often in your childhood, most likely in your childhood, also could happen later on, you learn to not trust yourself and you learn to need external validation to understand something is true. So, in order to address people pleasing, you have to learn how to validate yourself without needing other people to do it, which is not easy. It takes, for me, it was a lot of personal challenges. It was a lot of exposure therapy, self-inflicted exposure therapy, I guess. But yeah, I think I'm gonna cap that people-pleasing convo right here. But yeah, to the person who asked this question, to anyone else who's experienced this, like, it can be really challenging to get to the point where you feel like you don't need other people to tell you what your life experiences have been and what they mean, because we grow up, a lot of us, or maybe not a lot, it feels like a lot, but certain people, including me, grew up learning to rely on other people to tell us what our reality was. So to reach a point where you're able to understand your reality and determine that for yourself, is kind of like, I guess, the goal of where you want to be, so that when people say you aren't autistic or say you're not something that you are, you're able to let it roll off of you. So yes, that's all for now. Yeah, happy, what day is it? Tuesday? Happy Tuesday to everyone. Okay, bye-bye.